we'll go ahead and start the recording. You can put this in your pocket, and it'd be better if you just put it down beside you. Yeah, sorry. And then just clip this on you. Closer down to your chest on your lapel here would be better. If the mic's too close to your mouth, it'll sound all blown out. That'll be all right there.
Is that good?
Yeah, that will be okay. Okay. Just take another look at the shot. I might have to adjust the lighting. It doesn't look that bad just with the way it's set up. We've got a nice natural light
There's
over
a
here.
light you can move around.
Yeah, and there's...
Or you can cut that one off.
Right.
Well, I hope you really... I think really that Mindfield is kind of a good subject for somebody else to make a story as much as they want to make out of it, because I think there's a lot there that you can probably understand that you can't when you just meet somebody off the street. But I mean, somebody off the street has just as much story with them, but it's hard to tap into it. But
okay, let me think. I think we're.
You
good.
want a chair?
I did have. Yeah, I've got one right here.
Or that
have
one.
LED lights to set up, but the way you got things set up here, the shot looks pretty good, and the lighting looks real good.
Oh, good.
So yeah. Only thing is, before we get started with the actual thing, is whenever I ask anything or when we interact, I'll give you a beat before I start speaking. Just give me a beat
What
before
now?
you answer. When we're interacting, like if I ask you a question or anything, just give me a beat, a second before you start speaking, and I'll give you a beat before I ask something else.
So you don't want me to talk over
Yeah,
you.
so we don't talk over each other. It makes it easier in the edit, because otherwise when I'm putting this together, I'm going to have to be like, like, you know, there's overlap. So that, that's about it. Try to speak in complete sentences. So like no yes or no answers. So like if
Me?
Huh?
Are you telling me how to answer?
No. So this is just standard stuff. You just want to make sure when you're doing an interview, you just want to make sure when you ask a person a question that you just don't say yes. Or like instead of, if I asked someone,
Oh, I'm sure.
what did you have for breakfast this morning? You know, instead of them answering, eggs and ham, they would say for breakfast this morning I had eggs and ham. So I'm sorry, I don't mean to. I'm not trying to be rude or presumptuous. This is just stuff.
I don't know how I'm going
to. Don't worry about it. If it's too much to think about, don't worry about it.
No, I'm not.
Okay.
So you don't want your questions to have to be in the video.
Not if I can help it. Not if I can help it. Because you have to think about when you're filming something. It's basically like gathering together pieces of a puzzle, and you got to think about how you're going to put the puzzle together to form a complete picture. And for an interview, that means making sure that you can cut out your own questions so you can use the answers in conjunction with other things that are going on in the film. I don't know. It's all right. It'll be all right. Other thing. I found out, because this is principally a photography camera, it will only record for 12 minutes and shut off. So I'll just start a new recording before beginning every question. If I clap, It's just for audio purposes, so just ignore it. That being said,
I think I know what you're saying.
and the first thing I wanted to start off with, because Mr. Scruton actually told me about this when we were talking yesterday, and I guess I just wanted to get your perspective on it because I didn't know it had happened.
Well, I'm sorry you're not going to be in it. You talk so well.
I'm going to be in it for sure. It's like I said, it's just the way you have to put films together. I don't want me asking the question and you responding because it breaks the pacing of a scene. I'm going to be in it because I want the documentary, because I'm just a private citizen. I want it to be honest, like this is me, this is who I am, this is what I know about this thing and this person, and so it's going to be told from my point of view, and it's going to have like my opinion in it and whatnot, and it's going to be narrated by me. So I'm going to be in it for sure.
Okay.
This is just the way we have to do things, so it comes out in the editing room. Okay. But like I was saying, I was talking to Mr. Fred Scruton yesterday, and I wanted to get your your side of this story because he told me that in last spring you had a fall.
I did.
Okay. I don't know. It was just a little concerning because I didn't want you to I know that I've read your books and whatnot, and I know in Volume 3 you described I can't remember exactly what the accident was, but you had an accident and you had you said I'm very lucky to be alive or something like that, and so I was initially going to ask you something about that, but I guess I just wanted to ask you about what happened I guess more recently last spring.
Well, I was working with one of my cranes, and so I was in the crane, and I needed to get back on the ground and walk up to my piece and do some adjustment. And when I was stepping off the back bumper, I just had it was muddy ground anyway, so I had mud on my shoes, and my feet just slipped out from under me. And I put my hand back. I was falling just back, just to sit down on the back of the crane, and flexed my wrist back, and it just broke the bone right there. I mean, it wasn't like you would think of a fall from a structure like that. I was just stepping off the back of a vehicle, and it was somewhat of an incline bumper, so that's all it was.
Was that like your first ever like real fall that you've had?
I think so. One time putting up a fire tower, I was about 8 feet above the ground and slipped and did the same thing. I just sat down on what was below me. That was more of a slip. That's not a fall. I mean, I haven't fallen, I don't think. Where you're free fall, I was always had my foot on something, man.
Like I said, I was just curious because I was initially going to ask about that. That was in the book. But
I don't remember what that was. I meant
to write down the exact like what incident it was. I have the page number, but that's not much good.
I mean, the way I write, I could have said I'm lucky to be alive after a rather common incident that just I needed to keep that in mind,
It wasn't. It was you had described it pretty vividly.
Maybe it's an automobile, close call in an automobile or something.
It was a close call. Something had happened, and you were.
I have had a load. I was picking up something with my crane, and I didn't have it secured well enough, and it fell. But I mean, it wasn't near me.
That might have been what it was. When did that happen? Was that the?
That was in it was in Volume 3. But I mean, it probably just reminded me how I could have just easily not buckled my belt well enough, and something like that, something closer to home, So I just needed to be careful about everything.
Gotcha. Apologize. This weather, it's making my nose act up. But yeah, I just thought I would ask about that, and because in your books, you sort of you contemplate on that sort of thing a little bit. I guess you were a little bit more dramatic about that little dropping the load back then when it first happened. But you were a little more contemplative about. I don't have any direct quotes that I wrote down, but there were parts in the book where, you would contemplate having an accident or whatever. Is that still something you contemplate, or has over the years you have grown confident enough in yourself and your abilities? It just never occurs to you?
I'm aware of it, but I'm comfortable. But I don't try to get complacent. But as long as one is growing, there's always a newness around in that which one is growing into. So you may have that type of higher level of concern or awareness about safety, such as that. Like I might get a new piece that's a large piece that has to be taken out. I've never climbed it before. Well, the first time up, you're more aware of the new things around, But as far as just generally working in the Mindfield and working with my equipment, I'm pretty comfortable. Once I am assured that things are secured, or the height doesn't bother me.
If I don't.
But did that make sense? I mean,
yeah, no, it made sense totally. If I don't
as long as you're growing
verbally while you're answering,
I forgot about the beat.
Yeah, no, don't worry about it. I was just wanted to make sure if I don't say anything while you're answering, it's
Giving
about
me
the overlap thing. I don't want my stuff interfering with people being able to hear your answer. Sorry, I didn't mean to start things out so morbid, but
golly, quit apologizing.
Okay.
I've done this before. It's like old hand,
Well, let's talk about in your books. You have a certain way you approach not just your work but your life, and you've talked about in your books before how you like having, especially with the Mindfield, it gives you a sense of control over your work, and like I said, it's sort of that sort of mindset of liking control over everything you do. At least in the way that I saw it reading your books, sort of permeated everything that you created and the way you lived your life.
I think that's right.
So would you say you still hold fast to that sort of philosophy of wanting control over your work and the things you do?
I do. I want I want a day of work by choice, and so if you want to enlarge that out, I want a life of activity or focus that's guided by choice and not just precarious or just bouncing around from one thing to another. And for the most part, I've I've been able to do that. And it may lead to, it may naturally lead to more chance for being stunted in some other areas, or maybe in some aspects even of the day, if you want to talk small. But I mean, I like doing things by choice and having as much control as I can. But I mean, I know that, like, I know that leaving some area open for play is healthful, and I like even for the controlled stuff to not even the factory like clockwork jobs, which there was a lot of, saying putting up like the water tank, a lot of just welding day after day. You know, I like to be able to keep a humorous eye about it, or a third eye about it, that, or just keep it open for, and letting it kind of show me the way it wants to go too. But I think my perhaps need for control is probably much genetically influenced, and has resulted in my finding an activity in life that I can pretty much do by myself, and not have to involve others, because whenever you involve others, or a lot of machinery, instead of just one or two pieces of machinery, it just increases the odds that you're delegating control to somebody else, or you don't have control. And it's also why I've had so much trouble with the challenges of being married to a person. It's because you just because you can't control people, But it's a important characteristic and influence. And I'm comfortable enough with it. I mean, it doesn't bother me. I mean, and it may not translate. My use of it may not translate to being understood by somebody else, or it may, it may be a problem. It may stand in the way of somebody else understanding if they want to try to. But that doesn't really. That's not my stage, because I'm just focused on doing it. And whether somebody sees it as I see it, sees my work as I see it, or reads my book as I read it, that it's not really up to me anyway. So it's not like it's just a it's just like that aspect to my work is for others to or for society, say, quote, to play with, you know. It would be their society stage or the community stage, you know.
I guess I just wanted to ask about that because, especially in Volume 4, your, how would I, protectiveness, I guess, over your, control of the Mindfield ends up playing a big part in Volume 4 because you continually blame yourself for not like watching all the workers doing their work and you worry about it so much. So you would say that that part of you comes genetically from your parents.
I think that the character trait or personality trait that inclines me towards wanting to be in control of events is likely genetically influenced more than I at first realized, and really wasn't conscious of whether it had a genetic. But my wife, being a psychologist, has educated me very much about, and it's been very interesting to learn how much genetics plays a part in all of us, and how it how it flowers, how it develops, and in Volume 4, which involves putting up my water tank, that was the first time that I had to hire somebody to help me, and that was putting the concrete foundation in the ground because I wasn't able, didn't have the dirt work equipment, goes down 15 feet, so that was a learning experience, and that's, you mentioned me complaining about not watching them. I mean, I was being the first time I really had to hire somebody, and I just kind of expected like a turnkey job, it's how naive I was, but they did as well as could be done, but I was just and they know how to dig and how to work rebar, but I had a set of blueprints, and I just thought, well, everything's got to go according to the blueprints, but it's designed to be adjusted or to take into consideration. Blueprints are the events that happen in the field, but it turned out okay, I think.
Yeah.
But anyway, it's done, and
yeah, no, I could tell that was sort of like a learning experience from reading it, and I mean, isn't that the story of everybody who hires help for a personal project? Because when it's something that's that deeply personal to you and that
that's
you've
right.
worked on for a long time,
Yeah.
it's like you say in the book a lot. It's your baby. It's like your child, and you don't want it. You're nervous when you give partial responsibility to someone else for it. So I totally get that.
Well, imagine somebody trying to put their thumbprint on your work. But the first time I noticed that things weren't going to the way I thought they should be, that's when I just said, well, I was really I've got to be more involved, in watching them or just knowing what's going on. But I enjoyed working with them. I liked them beforehand, and I like them still. and I liked them more all along because my dad had used them to build, do construction work, and the owner, Mr. David, whenever I'd see him, and my dad came up with something, I always got the feeling he liked working for my dad, And I mentioned that in the book, I think. Mr. Charlie always pays on time, or whenever there was a choice to do it one way or the other, Mr. Charlie would tell him to, Mr. Charlie was my dad, Charles, and he would call him Mr. Charlie, would tell him to do it make it last. And I'm sure Mr. Colston, that was just the type of person he probably wanted to work for,
I was curious, recording, but I was curious because, obviously in the book, whenever you're referring to a piece of equipment, you refer to it by the name that you give it.
Mm-hmm.
So, you've got, your Sylvia bite, and your Oshti trailer, and Pyrena. So I was wondering, when you get new pieces of equipment, if you still name them?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think I named my laptop computer, or my computers, and I named my motorcycles, but I've got a Hobart welder, which I just call the Hobart, I think. But yeah, let's see, I got a airless sprayer, and I can't think what I call him. Anyway, I don't use it that much, but it's just easier to, once you've established the name, and it lends to a sense of community within my journal, when I'm writing about it. I can't think what I call that airless sprayer, but it does such a good job, gosh. And, but I do, yeah.
So, in a way,
and that way I can once I've established like a name and have talked to it, I can use and have started them on the road to being like alive. I can have them talk back to me, in my journal, just for the richness of the existence, which otherwise can be very factory-like. So mundane, give a name to God, so you can sit down and talk to him in English,
That reminds me, it's not exactly a one-to-one scenario. Yeah, I don't want you to think that, but it kind of reminds me of, have you ever seen that movie with Tom Hanks called Castaway? Where he gets stuck on an island and he doesn't have anybody to talk to,
he names
so he
that.
has this little ball and he puts a face on it and he calls it Wilson. I sort of got that from your books, that naming things were sort of your way of like almost fostering like a little community.
That's
like
right.
You didn't have coworkers, but like your equipment were your trusty coworkers. And that's interesting that you say, in a way, you do it as well to help the narrative of your notes. I think that's really interesting as well.
But you can think of how people do that with nature. The stars. They name star. Big Dipper. It's just a bunch of pattern of stars up there. They impress on them their own type of names from their names that have something to do with their lives, and I'm sure aspects of nature are done. So you name hurricanes, You know, Katrina came through, the remnants of Katrina, when I was putting up the water tank. We were expecting a lot of wind, and it just didn't do anything here, you know. And the next one, I think, blew harder, and it blew one of my plastic Barbie dolls over from the hip down. But it's not unusual. I mean, I'm just doing it. I'm just kind of copying or doing it in my own little way, in my own little acre, shop, or my own little story in a book. It's not. It ought to be common enough where that should not get in the way of people not understanding what I'm talking about.
I mean, I will say, when I was first reading your books, you were mentioning these things, and I was pretty sure you were referring to equipment, but I wasn't totally sure until, I kept reading and I was like, okay, yeah, he's talking.
My water tank is Dina. And that was the name. That was the name of the factory, Dina Lamp Products. So why not call it that? And well, anyway.
Yeah, I didn't mean to make you think that I was asking that because I thought it was, strange or anything. I just thought it was, neat. I just thought it was really neat, and so I just wanted to get your, get your thoughts on why you do that. So.
Well, I may come off sometimes as getting raising my voice at such a question that seems unknowledgeable about the ways of life. But I know you're probably asking that from a perspective of somebody that doesn't know anything about me, or
I've found out as much as I can about you, but there's certain things that I've told to people, the more you find out about, the more you want to know,
Yeah.
So yeah, I did want to, it's very clear from reading especially your notebooks that when work stops on the Mindfield, it's like you lose all sense of direction and purpose. And when you're stops to write for the winter, you gets frustrated, and it's like at one point you just say you're totally done with writing volume 1 and you just gave up on it. And it really comes from you admit this a couple times in the book, a frustration of not being able to work on the Mindfield, because that's like your purpose and what gives you a sense of direction in your day to day. Do you still? Would you say that's still the case now?
Well, if I understand your question right, I mean, I think the metal Mindfield is the main focus, especially during the middle part of life when you're physically able to do it. I really do. And the notebooks are sort of like a companion focus. They do help me to work on the Mindfield. But when I do, when I usually don't work in. I find it easier to work consistently on the Mindfield week after week. But then when the seasons change to where the odds are that weeks at a time are going to be too cold, or snow or whatever, I found it better just to stop altogether. And anyway, that for 4 months, November, December, January, and February, and that gives me the opportunity to, since probably the mid-90s, to work first on my first book, which was that autobiographical novel, and then since then, especially maybe the last 6 or 8 years, trying to work on my journals, on getting them to be published. But when I wasn't working on my writing during those winter times, I might do maintenance on machinery. I had to rebuild several of my machines, so I would just do that during the winter time. But I think you're right. As you started out, when I'm not working, I mean, it doesn't have to be the Mindfield. I mean, if I'm working on a maintenance at the car wash or on a machinery, you know, and some reason I just not in the mood, or parts aren't right, I don't have plan B, parts aren't available, and I don't have plan B for something to do today, I find that hard. I find an unexpected work stoppage to be hard to deal with. I mean, when I plan for it, I can, you know, it's often useful, but isn't that the same with everybody though? Oh, it's hard to sit on your butt, you know, and in response to being asked why I do, say, the Mindfield, because that's what most people see, you know, why do you do this? It's an easy way, I mean, a understandable way to answer that is to say, well, it keeps your mind straight. You know, when work stops and you have nothing to do, you know, I've heard that often from other people, you know, it keeps my mind straight, keeps, you know, keeps me out of trouble. You know, well, I don't quite look at it that way, but it keeps me out of it keeps me out of being frustrated.
Yeah, I think, you know, there's a lot of people for sure who are like that. I mean, I'm like that. If I don't have like something like this to work on, some sort of like video thing, I just feel like, what am I even doing? Like, I can try to relax. I can try to go home and, like, you know, watch TV or something, but in the back of my mind, I'll just be like, what? There's like, it feels almost like I have to earn, you know, that relaxation.
Oh yeah, I'm big on earning. I have a saying that was once on a painted stump. It's in one of my books. I think it's Notebook 3. When I no, it was in 4. It was in 4 when I was putting up Dina. In honor of getting what you deserve and deserving only what you work for. You know, I'm really big on earning. I don't like gratuitous gifts or gifts, you know, outright gifts. Even when Dad would give us gifts, you know, I always felt that in some part we had earned it, my brothers and I, you know, because of being a part in the family and doing maintenance work on the family or on the family business. You know, it's much easier to receive such things, and things that are given, things that are altruistically given, I don't know if they're worth having. I don't know if I could accept them, you know. I just don't, because I don't think I would have earned it, you know, I think even it's hard for me to believe in altruistic giving, because I mean I feel like that even the people that are participating in giving from that point of view are satisfying some inner need they have to do that, which is fine. But that's not altruism. I mean, that's not true altruism, I don't think. I mean, they're doing it to fulfill a purpose. And when I receive it, I may not I don't want to be I don't want to string myself into believing that I am participating in their reasons for giving it. I want to receive it because I think of my own standing, own reasons of earning. I don't know if that quite. I will often run off on the side of some.
It's all right. I mean, that sheds light on certain parts of your books, because you talk about, particularly in volume 1, there was a time in your life where you were insistent to your dad about paying your own bills and things. So you really had this philosophy. Earning, everything you get. You really had that philosophy for a really long time.
I think so.
When do you think you started sort of developing that philosophy?
I don't know, but surely soon after high school graduation. It must have been in place before, but I can't remember any instances that would reflect on that. But I lived at home after I graduated, after a brief summer somewhere else. And I felt like I ought to pay my way. I just didn't want to. And that may be tied to somewhat wanting to be in control, or feeling that, well, if somebody is paying my way, then I'm going to be obligated to them to do something, or to earn it, and I just soon kind of settled the books, which paying it monetary ways are an easy way to settle the books, because it's legal tender, it can be swapped out any way you want to. I don't know where it came from. I just probably just wanting to be in control, I guess.
So, in other words, when you receive...
wanting to not get 5 steps into something and then be presented with a bill for those 5 steps. It's like, if that's what this was costing, I want to be in on the first, to better deal with it.
So, in other words, you would say that when gifts are given, in your view, it sort of unlevels the playing field. Would you say that? To where you think you need to either give something back to them or earn what they've given you in some way? Or do you
if you receive the gift.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you accept the gift, I think it's done. Behavior is done for a reason, and if it's gift giving, I think the giver has a reason to give it, and I think for giving it or offering. And if you decide to accept it, you're buying in on something. You're accepting more than just the gift. You're in part accepting the reasons for it being given, and they may entail more than just the loaf of bread, that's being swapped over. So I like to be clear about that from the get-go. And if I understand altruism, or altruistic giving, it proposes that it's offered with no strings attached. But that's all. I just don't see that as being possible.
So you see all giving as inherently
tied
all people
to
who give gifts all inherently have ulterior motives that would benefit them. In other words,
they're doing it for, in my opinion, it's being offered for a reason. Mm-hmm. And I would assume that they think the result of it would be for the betterment of something, and the giver may believe it will better themselves and better the one that's receiving it. and by token, the community, But if you decide to receive it, then I think it's better to know the context of the exchange. Just it's to have it all understood, And so, what you're getting into something, and it may not be worth spit on either side, but then it might be, and a year later you're presented with something, I want you to do this for me, and the person asking may be thinking he has the right to ask because you accepted the gift from him earlier. It's likely not. It's likely understood enough on both sides that it is not a problem. But there are times when it's not understood, and it can be a big problem. But, for the most part, it probably is learned over the years by everybody that there are likely to be strings attached to this, and it doesn't have to be a gift. I mean, any action between people. You and I, you and me, if that's more grammatically correct. You may be expecting things, and I may be expecting things where in this meeting of us, and later we find out, well, we're surprised by how we didn't know this earlier, and it may not be a worse bit, or it may be a flower that, wow, I'm glad that happened. I never would have thought of that. It doesn't have to be like a gift that's gift wrapped, with a bow on it. I've been told, if I understand her right, by my wife, that my skills of social intercourse are below par. But I've never thought of it. I never thought of me having trouble, because I usually don't, or I usually have not entered into those group situations where I thought, well, I'm just not going to be comfortable here anyway. But one-on-one, I've never felt like I've lacked for skills, but I may in a group, probably do. So I may not, anything I might say about group behavior is probably amateurish, or it may come off suspect. It should be taken with a grain of salt. Somebody who's on the side.
Well, I think your perspective is just of, a lot of people's who, particularly on the point that you prefer one-on-one, more personal interaction in a big group. I mean, that's a lot of people. That's just being introverted and preferring more intimate conversation than like small talk with a bunch of people. So I mean that's a lot of people. So that's totally.
Well, I mean, you popularly hear it expressed like being a people person or not, But I think my younger brother, the minister, is, and I think my dad was. I mean, they both were ministers, So automatically you gotta like being in the spotlight and talking to people. And my Bob is especially good. He's a teacher too. I mean, works in school. system. I mean, he is good with groups, he really grew into being somebody that I thought was a very good speaker. And I mean, I don't, times I go to church willingly, since growing up. It's been because of the well delivered, well crafted message of a person, and my brother Bob, he just I remember telling him, he's just very good at it, and I like seeing that. And it doesn't have to in almost any field, if they are a professional, it doesn't have to be like grizzly bears that you mean. It could be house flies. Somebody that's in the house flies, but can just talk and in a way that comes across as being their way of being their version of reading or writing Shakespeare. It has an attraction to me. I don't quite know how I got off into that, but
it's all right. It is okay. But yeah, I mean, it's all very interesting stuff. I just thought I would,
but still, I mean, if I'm talking about it and it seems like I'm getting excited, you can rest assured that excitement is that type of excitement and subject matter is what excites me about my work or about day-to-day life, and so that will be whether it's in my metal minefield or my minefield writing, that's what I'm. You can be sure, rest assured, it's there somewhere.
So, you would say that a lot of the things you've said so far are why you work the way you work. Then.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, why? I'm trying to think of why the way I.
You don't have to go into it if you don't want to.
No, I was just trying to. I don't mind going into. No, I'm just trying to. It's a good reflection of the other areas of my life. If I get yeah, you're right. I think you're right.
Okay.
Why I work the way I want to, and what I would like to work on, what I like to work on. Maybe. And okay, yeah.
We can sort of loop back around it, I guess. But I guess while we're, I'll just skip around what I have written down here while we're talking about, your beliefs and whatnot. I, have always, and this is something that I've held off from asking you because, I wanted to be able to record your answer. But your father, was a pastor, obviously, and you were raised in not just as his son, but also in a small town that was very, very much, religious. Obviously, you don't share those religious beliefs, and you don't go too much into how that came to be in the books. So I just thought I would ask you about how exactly you came to have the atheistic worldview that you do, because it's clear in the books it's a worldview that is atheistic, not out of any sort of rebellion, but out of a belief that you control your own life, and that the world and whatever it is yours to make of it.
Well, I believe I control my own life to the extent, or in the context that it can be controlled. I mean, there are a lot of things that can't, it can't be. And the idea of making your own life, I mean, some things are subject to being made. Okay, you can you can choose a career, but only among the choices that are available. And then okay, and but I mean, my dad was a minister, and I was raised, as you said, in a community, and I went to church. But much of that was before I'd quote grown up, or a person starts to think for themselves. I mean, in growing up and being raised, a lot. I think with me, it's just you're doing things because other people did them, and you're not really thinking for yourself. I mean, you're taught words, so you're taught this and that. You're taught the Lord's Prayer, and you learn it, but you're not. You're just doing it because that's the way it's presented to you. You're memorizing it. But once I started to think for myself, I just didn't see any evidence for a few of the things, as I was brought up in Christianity. So I didn't see any evidence for a few of the things that I thought Christianity had as major points. And I saw a lot of evidence that indicated to me that things were otherwise. And but those are few points, I would say, but they're touted as like I don't know how to say it, a watershed moment. They're touted like, these are core beliefs, if you're going to be a Christian. And so I just didn't see any point in that. But otherwise, and and my dad, I told my dad this while he was alive, that if you were to compare the daily practice of our beliefs between he and I, or him and me, I have trouble with that. They would be almost identical, except for those few points. He and I both believed, as maybe other people do, in being honest and doing unto others, as you would have them doing to you. Being fair. I feel like he and I were just on the same page about that. And that took up the majority of our days and how we were, very like we were mirror we were on the same page, except for those few points. You know, he did believe in a God. You know, that can be interpreted anyway. But anyway, general God, you know, creator of heaven and earth, you know. And I didn't. And he did believe in an afterlife, like generally, you know, I'm not, in no point going into all that definition, you know, and I don't. You know, I believe it just as I started thinking for myself, it just looked to me like these definitions of God and the afterlife were just natural, man-made products that arose from a natural urge to have a context that's that you could hold in your hand. You know, picture of God, you know, man created in God's image, you know. Well, you know, it's something you can hold in your hand or hold in your hand, get your head around, you know. But it just struck me as I couldn't get beyond them being just a product of, like I said, a natural urge to have a context, you know. And I'm sure I do, like you mentioned earlier, you know, I give names to inanimate objects. You know, well, it's easier to get my hand around the situation, you know, or the environment, you know, and Christianity did it, you know, by having the story of creation, the Garden of Eden, you know. Well, I'm doing it I think the same basic human urge to have to facilitate the natural result of that, of making it more human-like, I guess, or being able to understanding in human terms, you know.
1 second, my camera's about to die. There's
Go
a
ahead.
battery in it.
Go ahead. I mean,
I apologize. The batteries only last so long.
we'll use it to our advantage. Don't worry about it. I never liked going in debt, but if I had the money, I didn't mind spending it on good equipment if it was connected to my work.
Exactly.
You know, but I've been fortunate enough.
There's been points where it's like, you know, certain things, it's like, oh, I'm not paying for that. And then when it comes to something like this, I'm like, okay, well, let's see how we can work this out. So, yeah. But batteries are batteries, you know, they only last so long, especially in cameras.
But you're talking about Warzak. I mean, even if he doesn't know me, I mean, he can participate. I would think you could get him to participate in his area of expertise. I mean, it's of contexting maybe the contemporary art scene or the historical art scene that mine may not connect to, may connect to, may have come out of. You know, of course, this whole book was like on trauma influenced. And
like I said, I'm gonna see if he wants to talk.
I think he'd probably like Fred.
Yeah, that's what I.
Are you rolling?
Yeah, it doesn't matter.
You got it pointed over here.
It's all good. I was talking to somebody because we were watching a mockumentary, which is a fake
Isn't that
documentary.
neat
Yeah.
idea?
And I told the person I was watching it with, I said, if you went into this not knowing it wasn't real, you'd figure it out real quick because they were able to get like it was like a mockumentary about like a fake videotape, like where like a stabbing occurred, and like it was like zooming in on the people in the background, like they were interviewing the people in the background. I was like, that's how you know, even if you didn't know going in, this was fake. That was fake because they were able to look at the background of that image, find out who those people were, find their contact information, contact them, and then they agreed to be on. Like all of that is astronomically unlikely. That's really all it comes down to is whether they say yes or no, even if you can't contact them. So, but to go back to what we were talking about your personal beliefs, I think that's similar to a lot of people's experiences, especially similar to mine because I grew up with extremely religious parents. Like I grew up thinking that basically people who weren't Christians were like inherently immoral, basically. But when I became an adult, around the age of 18, 19, like yourself, started thinking for myself, I just started picking things apart and thinking, that's just not, and I started seeing too the kind of people who I would be if I lived out that philosophy that I thought that I had to its fullest extent. And they just weren't, they just weren't pleasant people to be around if you weren't 100% like them in belief. And so at some point I just decided that wasn't who I wanted to be, and just changed my whole worldview about that. And it's like you said, besides the basic tenets of Christianity, of believing in a resurrection or a God or an afterlife or whatever. There's nothing stopping you from being a moral person without without religious belief, and that was something that I had to, come to terms with myself, and I think that was a whole lot of people. I wanted to ask you about that because, it's interesting to see someone who grew up down here, and who ended up evolving personally in that way, especially in the way that you have those beliefs, but they're not out of a sense of rebellion at all. And religion actually plays an important part of all of your work. In your books, you will describe long speeches as sermons and have that sort of religious terminology in there. Your Mindfield itself has, you compare it to parts of it to a church.
I do.
We've discussed your paintings. I think you've even said this yourself that they take influence from stained glass windows.
And that one is the man standing on earth contemplating the church.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, it's just interesting. I guess I wanted to ask you really. Despite your personal beliefs, what is it about the religious iconography, religious terminology, and mythology that makes it such an influence on your work?
Well, as you said, I grew up with a Methodist minister father, and grew up in the church and the culture of that. But I'll first say something about my dad. While he was a minister, his interaction with us did not result in me, and probably my brothers too, thinking of him as a minister. He was a dad first, and of course your mention of my use of the religious terminology and stuff really is very good, I think. Because you grow up with that around, and so he would perform. We went to church, and elsewise during the week or something, we would go to funerals with him. You know, we had kind of all the full dress of having a father for the minister. You know, but he did not preach to us at home. You know, he would be in his study maybe the Saturday, and we knew he was working on his sermon for the next day. But he did not, or my mother, they did not instruct us in what you might think of as the Christian belief or the Christian sermon or the Sunday school lesson that way. He just we learned that from him, not through that, but through his practice of it. You know, the practice of the meanings of the stories or of the religion, you know. And so that was around, you know. So that's and it was a good thing. It was a positive experience, you know. It wasn't something so there's no point in rebel against that, you know. The things that I later couldn't accept were exposed to me during, not through his sermons, but through Sunday school lessons or through other preachers preaching from the pulpit, you know. But anyway, that terminology was part of my upbringing, so it's part of my fabric. It wasn't an ugly thing, you know. It's a positive thing, nourishing this, and you know, and so that was kind of like my language, part of my language, and so why not make use of that in to be a enhancement to what I went into after that, or what I decided to work with after that. Let's see. I mean, you mentioned my metal Mindfield. I have mentioned it like being an outdoor church and having a sanctuary. I was conscious of that from the get-go. Well, once it started on taking on dimensions of looking like a structure or building, you know, I wanted that, you know, because I think even personally, or for your inside your head, or through how you interact outside your head, that there is an aspect that it is special. It is for me special. Not always. I mean, sometimes you lose it, or sometimes you don't recognize it. But it is special, and it is special in a holy way. And by that I mean not in a not in a way that can be, not in a way that's not available to everything. Everything should have, in my opinion, in my view of it, or in my definition of holiness, I mean, everything has that in them. I mean, that everything is existent. And just by that fact alone, for me, I attribute to those, or that, is having that aspect of holiness. You know, I mean, they deserve the right. They are existent. They deserve the right to be here. You know, and just the presence. That presence is special, or it should be, or I would like to think it is special. And my use of describing my mental Mindfield as being church-like, I mean, it's I use that word church-like just because in growing up, church was a place that it was taught to me that this is something special. You know, this is where you learn, you sing songs, or you learn why things are, and you don't. I didn't grow up associating that with grammar school. You know, grammar school was more like just learning a dictionary. You know, cut and dry math problems. You didn't think of math having it does, but I didn't think of it as having a beauty to it. You know, we're just typing here. You know, you just learn how to type. You know, it's cut and dry. But man, you know, there is that church-like aspect because you can do a lot with typing. You know, but in church, it just seemed to be taught or presented to me from the get-go as, man, this is, you know, this has a book written about it. An old book, you know, and so that's why I use that. It's just kind of like a useful connection to the past that it doesn't bother me if it has larger aspects to it. You know, I think it. I mean, my description of it as being an outdoor church might have some implications to someone who grew up in a mosque. You know, well, imagine if I'd told people that I think of it as an outdoor mosque. You know, around here. Well, dang, you know. But so church might have that same type of dangness in another context, but I don't worry about that. I mean, I'm not dealing with that, you know, and that type of friction or difference it can have in a different neighborhood. Well, it's to be dealt with when you're talking about neighborhoods or something. I do like that when you say I've answered your question or something.
Yeah. Sorry. Like I said, I don't want to.
I don't mind talking. I don't mind talking about this, but I just don't want to use up your storage space on stuff that you're not going to use or something. You know.
Don't worry about it. In my opinion, I mean everything is subject to be used depending on.
But it's important for if people want to understand me that my dad was a minister. He could as well have been an electrician. You know, he didn't teach us the ways of being an electrician from the pulpit. It was just how he practiced his everyday life. You know, he tried to live a clean life, you know, and treat people fairly. And and like I said, I'm just repeating again, if you were to compare our lives and the way we daily live it and treat people, almost identical, I think. You know, and probably reflect a lot of things that are you would think that are taught as being Christian tenets or whatever, beliefs, you know, which Christianity, I'm sure, mirrors other world religions likewise in such social ways that are meant to be deal with society, you know.
Yeah. But I mean,
it's just a different name. The American Indians probably had the same thing, you know, but maybe they thought of the sun as being the creator. there's no point getting hung up on the names. I mean, you might could compare the Christian story of creation with some American Indian story of creation. It's it's except for the names, it could be basic, or the timeline. It could be basically the same thing. You know, this is something more than us, and it's understandable in ways that comes back around or nurtures us. You know.
I mean, you think about it this way: the Abrahamic idea of God is basically spawned 3 different religions, because you have Christianity, Judaism, which is basically Christianity, they just don't believe that Jesus has come yet, and then Islam, which is significantly different from the two, but it's like you said, there's a lot of overlap between all of them. So yeah, for sure, we basically just like give this stuff different names, even though a lot of it is the same.
And it wouldn't surprise me if the reason why these different religions might be at odds with one another, when such odds do crop up, is because it has been connected or tied to real estate or property. You know.
Right.
Or minerals, you know, the tacit world, you know.
Property, the idea that somebody owns something else, or they're owed something. I mean,
in a physical, in a way that's tied to bread and butter, you know.
Right. That's what this country does. We hear about a country that has oil, and we're over there lickety split. Let me see.
But I doubt anything I say or write about have done, it has not been done as well. The essence of it has not been done as well or done already by others. You know, it's just that mine's done now and here, as opposed to there and then. You know, and for that reason, it generates interest to those here and now or here. It's not. I don't look at it as that being that special. It's important to me, but I don't. I'm under no illusion that alone makes it important to somebody else, and I don't really care if it's important to somebody else. It's other people's importance is for them to make.
While we're on these sort of abstract topics, I guess this would be moving it more towards the concrete. But I wanted to talk about your political history, because it seems to me through reading your work that you've always leaned toward the left of the political spectrum. You grew up in school during high school during the ending of segregation, and you were pro desegregation. You've been pro LGBT rights. I assume you voted for Bill Clinton in the 90s, because you talked about how much you liked him back then. And
did I? Well, yeah, I did put up a sign. I remember it got run over next day.
I was gonna point that out, is that in your
that's just a small community.
You put up a sign, and I think you said within the same day it was torn down.
Yeah, or the next morning it was gone.
So I guess my question was going to be, let me see, have there been any other examples of, because you've had other public displays like the gay rights sign and things like that. Have there been any other examples of public pushback for your political beliefs?
Well, there may have been, but I'm very likely would not know of them because I just don't circulate that much. And for my political beliefs, is that what you? I don't think so. I mean, I'm not political. I mean, some of my beliefs may be applicable to the political scene, but I'm not really into politics or even local politics that much. I mean, I will vote. I've always voted since I was old enough to, and I only did not vote one time, and and that was in a presidential election, and but I don't think if I've had pushback from the community, it wasn't presented as because of politics or something, and I don't really feel much. At times especially when I put up the water tank, when I closed a street in front of my shop, which was fairly well used in order to put up the water tank. I sensed some interest and pushback there because many people thought it was a public street, but it wasn't. It was one my dad had built and maintained. And and a year or so before that, when I decorated my truck in a certain way, I think it speaks well of the community. I mean, I didn't. There may have been opposition to it, but I never felt that. I mean, if I did, it was no more than if they didn't like the way I dressed or something, combed my hair or something. And then when I started painting the water tank, I think some people thought I might put something up there that was really inappropriate. And I got word of mouth that a petition was being circulated around town trying to get me to stop, And you might talk with Franklin Smith about that. But I never saw it. I did see him respond, I think, in the newspaper about it. But I didn't feel I was prepared if I had to do so, if I had to adjust my work because of the public. If I was breaking some law, I was perfectly willing to do that, and had made some plans for that if that were to happen. If they didn't want me to, if they could come up with some legal right for me not to put up that water tank, well, I'd probably just put it up lying down, on the side, and use it as an appropriate response to that, but then on a more personal level, just as a way of responding to how, on a personal level, some things don't always go according to plan. Well, you don't have to scrap the whole thing, just maybe adjust it a certain way instead of putting it straight up, just lay it on the side, and then you could build in a whole story behind that, for yourself. I think the community, I've said this before, I think the larger and better story of the Mindfield is the community side to it. But it's harder to tell. It's likely harder to tell, so it doesn't get done too much. But and that story may be more easily translated for public consumption, if you want to, or to be for other people, than one on just me, you know. But,
it's going to be all encompassing, so you know.
every I assume every community or neighborhood has eccentric characters. I had them when we were growing up, you know. Somebody, Sidney Sternberger, you know, would dress a certain way and a cigar in his hand with a cane, you know, or hang around the courthouse, you know, and people would tell me stories of him chasing kids off with the cane, you know, and we have them today, you know. But the better community, but Sidney was tolerated is not the right word. Sidney was included. He wasn't ostracized. That's a great story we have them today, and the more you can include those families have them, you know, what they call them, bad apple or something, a bad penny or something, or, you know, in a family, you know. But the more you can realize it as the beautiful variety of being here, you know, the better it is for me anyway. And that time again, that type of approach is the way. And these other types that I'm talking about is the way I try in my work and the stories I try to build into them for myself and in my writing. You know, that I'm sure it comes through. I mean, I don't talk about living in Nevada. You know, I don't live in Nevada. You know, and I haven't talked about it here. You know, but what I'm talking about, I'm sure, because my work and my journals are so maybe claustrophobically one and the same, maybe. You know, the talking of one or doing something in one is done in the other way in journals through the English language, you know. But it's all part and parcel, or the same of, you know, a patchwork quilt like thing. But I lose it sometimes.
Yeah.
I mean, I get where I can't see that. You know, maybe work stops or something. You know, I don't have a handle on him, or whatever, for whatever reason. A natural push, ebb and flow of life, where I can't see that damn thing as a church. You know, it's not talking to me. You know, it's quiet as a whatever. You know, church mouse. You know, it's like it doesn't make sense to me. But then it comes back around, and that's it may lead to those instances, those events may lead, or are probably good opportunities for growth. You know, something's not working here. Well, it needs to be addressed. You know, and so, you know, we do it this way next time.
Yeah, your philosophy about, you know, and views on community really do come out in your books. I think there was a part in one of your books where you said something along the lines of a life isn't worth, or you either said a life isn't worth anything or a life is worth more, or most of life's meaning is gained out of a larger whole. And so I got that a lot from your books. And I know in Volume 3 in particular, there were times where you sort of lamented not having I guess, not necessarily a tighter community around here, but like, I guess, close circle, because you would talk about not wanting like intellectual company.
Yeah.
So I was wondering if that desire went away on its own, or when you married your wife, if that had an impact on that sort of desire.
Uh, yeah, I would at times. Um, I suspected it was out there, and because I had evidence of it, you could see it, you know, through stories presented on TV or movies or in books, you know, that it was a common thing, and even you meet people briefly, or listen to a speech or go to somebody talking about something, listen to a sermon, you know, that dang, those people, there's something there, and they're smart, and they know a lot about being a plumber, you know, or something, and that. So at times I could, at least I thought, I would feel like I could really use that type of company. It'd be really nourishing, you know, or you know, it could be, and it could be through an actual person being there. I probably most often miss that because I more regularly could get it through a good book, you know, or see a movie mostly by chance that just turned out to be, oh man, really good. But I would, I missed that at times, and but I never was successful in having that around at a regular on a regular timetable or regularly, and never through a person other than my dad. Now he was smart, you know, and full, you know, and we would get together twice a week and eat out, and but I'd seen him so much we were real comfortable. But you know, it was I would still want for something a little different, another person, a different thing, and that never happened, and until I met my wife, and I think because I never had I'll call it inspiring company to amount to anything. I was naturally naive of what it would actually be. And so when it came about that I had the opportunity to be around somebody like that, it developed into being much more and much different than I had bargained for, in both, if you want to call it, good and bad ways. And it fairly quickly showed me how immature my idea was of what being in such company regularly would be, and what it would require to keep being in it. And fairly quickly, I mean, at first, for a good little spot, is very, it was almost all good, you know, but nothing's that way. I don't care. I assume nothing's that way. I have every evidence to believe that nothing's that way. And especially with a person, if you're a part of being in the company, if two are being in the company of each other, the fullness of each of them will eventually come into play. And the other parts of them, or of them, or of just the natural reality of a relationship will come into play. And it turned into much more work than I'd ever bargained for. My plate is full, and that's been the greatest challenge, is not only having the time for it, but having to accept the necessity of what might be comparable to in my own work, mundane or factory-like or sideline stuff. There's a lot of factory-like shifts I'm gonna call it a marriage, because that's what I am in a marriage. It's just factory-like. I don't mind washing dishes, but it's often been compared to that. I don't mind taking out garbage, but it's often been compared to that. Washing dishes or taking out garbage. But there are those things that equate to that for me would be like what's often described as washing dishes or taking out. And I have not yet, in my own work, I've come to terms with it, and once you come to terms with it, it's for me, it's been, you begin to see room for growth and seeing it in a different light. Maintenance on equipment and stuff. Well, or house cleaning or shop cleaning. I can turn this into a good something. And I might put a toilet in the Mindfield. And just make it more rich. But I haven't got there quite with my marriage, where I haven't been able to accept the whole package. And and probably that inability to get there so far causes the most friction, but I'm still hedging my future, or on the possibility and likely the desire for it to happen, So I can't quite remember how we got started on that. Something about the way I looked at my work or something, or how I was.
I was asking if the desire for you called it. What did you call it? Engaging company or whatnot. If that changed when you met your wife, and I guess
it did. It did. I mean, I'm not as immature about it. You know, I didn't know what I was. I was probably earlier just desiring an evening of a good sit down movie or with a person, you know. But when it actually came to having that regularly, well, I felt like this was, and I still feel like that was my only chance, or is my only chance to have it regularly, and I didn't want to miss that chance. And but it's changed. It's a different. It's a different. I know what I was wanting then is different than what it would be getting it regularly. I think I've said somewhere that, and I probably still believe it, that the best aspects of being married is having company when you want it, but the worst aspect is having it when you don't want it. You know, but that's you can't have one without the other. You know, but I haven't quite got there all the way, as I have in my work. You know, and eventually I may lose it in my work. You know, I don't know. I don't know.
You, in other words, you could say that you wanted that kind of company, you know, for pleasure, and it ended up being
I mean, pleasure is not. It's kind of
pleasure of the mind
for a very meaningful experience.
Right.
I wanted it to
meaningful. The meaningful experience is.
I wanted to sit down with Shakespeare. Can you imagine that? Dang, and then I'd learn a lot too. But I mean, I wanted to, I just would. It would be nice to have some evening, had that.
I guess my meaning was, if you had like an evening with Shakespeare, that would be pleasurable for you because of how much you would learn or grow from it intellectually. Would that not be accurate to?
I think it would be pleasurable. I mean, I would probably describe it as a good evening, but pleasurable, it leaves a lot to be said in what the experience would have been.
Too strong of a word,
it's too superficial. It's not purposeful. I mean, it would be purposeful is more of a description. I mean, and purposeful and instructive and positive and wow in so many ways, and along with feeling good about it or pleasurable, and I won't say sticky, but something that would stick with you. The next day they would be gone, or the experience would be over, but it sticks with you. It's like, and you'd still be thinking about it, and then you'd see about it cropping up in your work. You'd be mentioning it, talking to other people about it. So in those ways, that's what I would wish for on certain occasions, and missed, or couldn't get it out of inanimate objects or the relationships between inanimate objects, and getting it from a person would be different, but it wouldn't be the same as that which I made out of my own work, but it was a aspect or dimension that I suspected was there and had evidence was there and would miss. But like I said, once it came along where I had the opportunity, and my wife is that type of person. She has that aspect about her that's there. But I mean, that's not her whole. That's not her whole self. Stuff. You know, she's the complete person like everybody else is, and with that completeness comes things that you don't really care about, and wouldn't put a dime's worth of energy into having to earn it, but but that can be turned once you accept it. The more you accept it, in the degree that you accept it, then you're able to, I'm sure, because I've done it in my work, turn it into a positive or nurturing or enriching whole part. You can include it, And it's like including the eccentric in the neighborhood. Well, the same thing about a person, but I'm aware that I haven't got there yet. And I don't know if you ever are with a person, because you can't control people. You're not supposed to control people. And they're fluid to begin with. It's not as... And there are aspects of work that are fluid too. But it's like on a different plane when it's embodied in a person. It is for me anyway. It still work. I don't know if it... With my relationship with my dad is the only example I have to compare it with. But with him, I think we reached a plateau where our existence was accepted, and the maintenance of that existence was accepted and known, and it allowed us to really it allowed us for the other aspects of our relationship to really be unencumbered by that, and which is not new. This stuff is, and your reference to my beliefs as being a philosophy. I've never liked that word. I've never liked calling my stuff art, or where I work a studio. But it very well may be appropriately described that way, but that's not the way I think of them, and I don't see that in them. My shop is a shop, and my work is just it's a conversation with myself and custom made things, but it may have an art aspect about it, but I might call it like a holy aspect or a special aspect. But that art philosophy stuff, philosophy is like, my opinion, is like a organized, published doctrinated way, and if it is, that's not that. Those aren't the terms I use, and I probably do have indoctrinated. Who doesn't? Habitual things, But I don't think of them. I think it's that philosophy, art stuff is like, it's just another it's a that's a language that is used by those in that field to talk about stuff which mine may be subject to or a subject of, but that's for that's for them. And you evidently have that aspect some degree about you because you use them.
I guess I try to use words the way everybody else uses them. You seem to have. I
doubt that creeps up much in my writing, though.
No, not particularly those ideas.
Philosophy. I mean the terms.
Right.
I mean terminology. But the church terminology does. Because it was like the part and parcel of growing up. It was the landscape of blue jays and cardinals. And not flamingos or eagles. And they're just not around here.
Yeah. In a way, you don't use those terms because you don't identify with them, right?
I don't identify them in a colloquial way or in a daily way or in a generalized local way. They're not a part of my daily existence. They are terms, used in Nevada or, elsewhere. You might read them in a newspaper talking about some other place, but I don't run across them in the grocery store or at the car wash, or around town at Walmart. Those words just don't crop up.
I wanted to talk a little bit about.
And I like that. I hate to interrupt you. I like that though. I like being comfortable in the language that's spoken around you, and that's one reason when I was a sophomore in high school is when first year of desegregation, and I think that may have been the year or the year after that a private school was organized, and I had an opportunity to go to there if I wanted to. I did not think of going to there. I didn't want to go to there. I lived in a community, where these other people were, and they were there in the freshman year. Well, some of them were there. Anthony was one of the first ones to be desegregated. They had a few students a year or two before, and I remember him in I think the 8th grade, and then freshman year in high school. It had a few like token experimental, they were going to desegregate, but I wanted to go through that, and I mean they were my friends, and call them friends. They were people I knew and talked to in the halls and stuff, and saw around town, and so I that's the language I want, and that's today it's the same thing. So I've forgotten why I got off on that. You started to say something, but anyway.
It's okay. You were just expressing how you want to use the language of your community.
Yeah.
I think that's great.
And why not? And that's why I understand when a person doesn't want to, for whatever reason, but that's one of the reasons and it's just from my perspective, why wouldn't a person want to do that? Why wouldn't you want to stay around here and do your work? I mean, you're not going to tell the story of Oregon or Portland around here or whatever influences come around there. But those stories in the local name or language are still there. I mean, the holiness of life is here just as much as it is there. And there's special things to each language or each area that you will miss if you don't change or don't go there. But you never will, or I never would have the lead up or the experience of the lead up to when I decide to talk about something that I would here because I've been here for so many years, if I were to change and suddenly move to another state and try to tell well, let's start talking about this. Well, I'm in another state, or I'm in another profession, or another relationship, starting over again. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
It's okay. I get your frustration, the idea of like
go ahead.
Getting comfortable somewhere and then like starting over from scratch. So
well, yeah, but I mean, I'm not frustrated if you want to leave and go find your way someplace else, but I just feel the loss of our community from you leaving.
Moving to another state takes money, so
Yeah.
I've got to save, and so I'll be here a while longer.
But okay. So I mean, there are times when the local language isn't appropriate for what a person might want to work on. So then you need to change or incorporate the other. And I mean, you're not going to go to medical school in Haywood County, And if that's what you want to do, then.
I did want to talk a bit about your relationship with your father, because it seemed to me that in your books there was a stark contrast between your relationship with him, like growing up as a teenager, and then later on in life, where there was a certain point where obviously you described him as your best friend, and you guys would habitually like go to certain restaurants and talk. But when you were a teenager, and I can't remember exactly where, it might have been in volume 1. In volume 1, book 2 of volume 1, you describe a conflict with your dad that you had. I guess it was either when you were a teenager or in your early 20s, over wanting, to be independent, paying your bills and whatnot. And like it even went, you described it in your book as even going so far as like just telling your father that I'm not your son. Like, I guess treat me as if I'm not your son. Was that a legitimate conflict there, or were you just trying to communicate your desires of how you wanted to be treated as
No, I think it was reflective of a conflict. And that was, volume 1 takes place when I was 19, 20, 21 years old. And, but I think I was I was what you would call a late bloomer or something. I think emotionally I developed slower than most people, but that was along the time when you start thinking for yourself, even though it might have happened a few years earlier. Well, it happens. It might happen when you're 16. It starts, but you're still learning how to think for yourself. And I eventually grew with my father, or he being the adult in the relationship, and I growing into adulthood. I probably grew into areas that he was already grown to, but we both grew together in a way. But I grew to think of him as my best friend. But that wasn't, when I was 20 years old, that wasn't so. And I wasn't with my mother. And when my mother died, when I was, I don't know, about 26 or so, see, I hadn't grown enough to really know her that well. I hadn't grown enough to really know my dad that well. It was later that I grew to really think much of him. I think a lot of him, And I feel like if I'd had that time as well with my mother, I probably would have grown into liking her just as well. She was different now. I mean, I would probably, she'd be a different person, but she'd probably have grown into being my best friend too. I think. I say that because I think when we were young, I think the way they were parents or treated us were very similar, So they probably, so likely as we had grown later in life, probably reflected that. But no, I had friction with my dad and my mom, but not enough to think of it, to look back on it as thinking that it was nothing but the best of upbringings, or that I couldn't have had. I feel like I couldn't have had better parents. There are certain aspects I wish they could have done differently, and I felt lacking on. Like sex education. I don't know how a parent does a good job with that, but I bet there are good ways, But they taught me a lot, and likely only by the examples they set and how they talked about it with the comments they made about it just in general, or how they mentioned comments about other people, somebody's gotten pregnant, and you got to take precautions and this. But I would have liked a lot more education from the parents. But I don't know how it's done, and I don't know how I would do it as a parent. But I don't know if I can think of anything else that I felt lacking in. But there was friction. I mean, and there were. I'm sure I rebelled. I'm sure every person growing up in a parental household has, or in any way, or rebels against the authority. But it was not. Probably my way of dressing was one way, because I can remember sophomore year of high school, my mother took me up to a dress store and bought an outfit for me. I was never a dresser, and I wore it to school and was rightfully made fun of. I mean, rightfully. I mean, she had good intentions, but it taught me, that dress is unless you have a school uniform thing, dress is a personal choice, and really what other people think about it, I learned how to let it roll off your shoulder. It doesn't even get on your shoulder anymore. You can think what they want to think, and I probably started dressing very in a way that was comfortable to me, but likely wouldn't win any awards, so that was probably one way of rebelling, but they didn't push back on it. It wasn't that. But anyway, and I had friction with my mother because I hadn't matured enough. Her like of antiques, or she seemed to me to follow the style of clothing, of what was in style, and I only saw that as a superficial thing, and that was probably because it probably wasn't with her. I don't know, But I didn't like antiques if they weren't functional, if you couldn't sit in them. That was just the way I was. But she liked that. We had chairs that you couldn't put your full weight on, more or less. You didn't want to mark up, and so I didn't understand that, and that was an area where friction was possible. But that was more on me, and but that's probably typical. I mean, and you grow, you learn your way out of that. And I feel like I would have come to have been good friends, described that way, best of friends with her, had she lived. And I don't know, somewhere along the line, it just you just realize that this with my dad, this is the person I would confide in, or be comfortable with, telling anything, tell jokes about, with, and enjoyed being with, and of course after a while, those opportunities of being just knocked off your chair by something were less and less because you knew more about them. But there were times when it's in one of my books, maybe when I'm writing, we were eating out, and he got to talking with the waitress, and somehow it resulted in him having the silly giggles. And, that was just so that was so nice to see. Where you just can't. You try to start talking, you just start laughing again, or something. Those things would happen here and there.
I got you. Yeah.
And I was glad to have it, and
like I said, I could see that evolution, reading your books, and throughout your life, how that relationship grew and developed.
And I tried, once I realized it, I tried to nurture it and appreciate it, and the same thing, and carry it over. That chance to appreciate that, carry it over into daily things that only I was involved with during my days, to not miss, to realize, well, this is my chance to be here, or this is my chance to have a good day of work on something important to me. So don't go about it, half-assedly, if you can help it. Try, and this is important. Don't do a good job. And if it's don't not do it just because it's hard, because some things are going to be hard at one time or another. And if it's going to be hard today, just realize that this is the chance not to miss on it. This is the time to get a hard thing done. So realize it, and let's get it done, and let it talk to you. Because I know I would regret it afterwards if I missed out. Dang, I missed that one.
Yeah. That's what life's about, is taking advantage of the
Well, I like to hear you describe that so often. That's what life's about, or that it's so that's what it's common with everybody, or something. Because I'd like to think that I'm not so far off track, even in my work, that I'm not typical, because I am a person. I'd like to think I'm working on things that people ought to work on, but because it's my opportunity to live as a human in this life. And so to hear somebody else describe it, well, that's the way it's done. Other people have done it the same way. Well, that's good. But I'm doing it I am doing it. I am the subject. But I'm glad that I am doing it like others do theirs. But
I mean, I'll put it this way. Everybody has, like I said, that's the way they live their life, is they take advantage of the opportunities in front of them. But everybody has unique opportunities.
yeah.
And you had your own set of opportunities. And in a way, that does set you apart from other people. But the commonality is that...
but the ones they have set them apart just as much. But it's not for me to do them. For them, it's for me to do mine.
Right.
I interrupted you again.
No, it's okay. It's okay. But yeah, you're exactly right. The commonality is that way of life. That's
well, you can ask my wife, because I will often tell her, I want to be normal, or I like being, being self-employed and having a public business for 35 years or so, and I didn't punch a clock, a factory clock, but I was on my own time clock and car, but she will say, she knows the differences, where I'm different, and I don't know if I accept them or see them or am qualified to see them, because I'm not clinically trained to see them, where she is, in a sense. So you can ask that. She's the one to ask, and so I may have a difference that is there, but I don't know how important it is to me. Because I've like I said earlier, I never felt any public pushback. Felt it in a way that it bothered me, or really that it was anything there special. But I'll say to Beth, I just fit in. I go around town, I fit in, and she'll say, "No, there's no one. It drives a truck like no one dresses like." No, I don't believe that. But you can ask her. I don't have to defend that statement. She's the one. I didn't say it.
I can't speak for anything that she says, but I would just say that my philosophy, or my belief, is that people are more similar than they are different. We're all human beings. When we get introduced to an alien race, then maybe we can start talking about how different people are on a very basic level. But I think on a very basic level, people are more similar than they are different. And in a way, she's right. There's certain things about you that are uncommon here, but that doesn't mean it doesn't mean you should be feel separate, from the community, and you don't. And the community seems largely, you're integrated with them. So.
I think so. And that gives you optimism, for world peace, if you want to put it on that stage, And to the degree you're ostracized, it gives you it gives you evidence of nationalistic conflicts.
Unity is what, is the gateway to peace. A lot of, you hear about shootings or whatever that happen, and a lot of these people are, like you said, ostracized, and they're alone. And they don't really have a support system. They don't have people they can talk to. They're either mentally ill or they become mentally ill as a result of feeling alone. Whether it's because of their beliefs or they are actually alone, it's this feeling of isolation that causes this fear that turns into violent chaos.
Mm.
So,
What do you think most negativity voiced by some person about another person is based in insecurity?
negativity voiced, like a criticism of
Yeah, something, ostracized, that's, separation or.
I think it's very dependent on the scenario. I think sometimes it does stem from that person's own insecurity, and I think that sometimes it stems from certain social or community expectations that they are accustomed to. Let me think of an example. Like, people didn't like your. That battery's almost dead again. But
How many did you bring?
I've got one more. But people sort of called you out for your Satan saves on the back of your truck. I don't remember where I was.
Well, not to me, but maybe to somebody else
right.
amongst themselves.
In general. I can't remember where I was going with that. Oh yeah, that wasn't necessarily stemmed from any insecurity that they have. It was more of a generally understood social mores, I guess you could call it, that everyone here respects a certain religion, and that they all treat those religious characters and symbols the same way. And obviously you did not, and so that resulted in I wouldn't say ostracization, but it certainly resulted in something of people looking at you a little different, at least for that period of time, for a little bit.
Or did it make them uncomfortable?
I mean, I haven't talked to anybody, like that, but that's just the vibe that I got from reading your books and talking to other people.
I don't think. Yeah, I think it was noticeable around the community.
Yeah, I didn't mean to bring that up to say that you were ostracized or anything like that. I was just trying to make an example, something perhaps in your. Oh, here's a much better example. You talked about when you wore clothes to school, and people made fun of you for that. That wasn't because of any insecurity they had. That was more, a certain way they expected people to look, and it imposed upon everyone socially, and so they were just acting on that. So I think it's on a case by case basis, really, because there are definitely certain ways that people gossip or criticize about someone else, and it does stem from insecurity. But there's always a distinct difference there where you can tell, because if you push, depending on, like, if you really push someone on some point they try to make about something, and it'll sort of bubble up to the surface where you can see, okay, well, what you're really doing is trying to defend yourself by attacking this person, or what you're really doing is espousing a view that's been taught to you your whole life, but you don't really know anything about it beyond a surface level. So it's a case by case basis, is what I think.
That's very good.
I did want to talk some specifics of your books, particularly Volume 1. And I guess this is more.
That's the novel you're talking about?
Yeah, the Sycamore Trees. I guess this would be a general question, but I was wondering, and I have a feeling this was influenced by Tolstoy, one of your favorite authors. You wrote it in a way where you're split into three characters, and it's in a way it's fictitious. And I know that Tolstoy made an autobiography that was also told in a fictional way, and the story sort of told his life story. So that was probably an influence on the way you wrote it. But
it
why?
Wasn't.
It wasn't? Wow. Okay.
Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, what made you write your autobiography in that sort of fictional way, where you split yourself up into three characters? What made you want to write that?
well, one thing about Tolstoy, I my first interest was in biographies when I was 18 years old or so. I really liked biographies, and I'd read the biography of a person, and if I liked their life, I guess, then I would read their books. And that's how it was Tolstoy. I hadn't read Tolstoy's works. I may have read a few of his short stories at that time, but I didn't read his works till later on. But I'd read his biography, and next I read his letters. But as far as why I split the character up into three, I have a definite memory of hearing the story, probably on the radio, of somebody with multiple personalities. And this is a clinical, a person who's clinically that way. And I just found that interesting. It kind of, I think I was thinking about, I don't know how far along I'd gotten in writing. Probably I was probably writing short stories, and thinking of writing a longer work. And it probably just coincided, my hearing that, with when I was really ready. I remember hearing it and thinking, well, I can do that. I can make use of that, because I wanted to write about myself. I was only 18, 19 years old, and in 20 and 21, and I was not technically versed in any field to be able to write with authority, not at all about anything other than myself, and two, I thought writing about myself, it would help me to learn, and so I was interested I read biographies, I was interested in that type of aspect, but I wasn't qualified to write a autobiography that way, with facts and dates and historical comment, and comparisons, all that, just like a traditional bio, So I just thought I'd write the story. I thought I'd write, instead of saying, well, I did this and I did that, and then I thought this way, and then I said to myself, this, that, and other, that if I would give names to different aspects of my personality, which I think most people have. I mean, I think at the time I was definitely aware of that people had analytical sides to them. The left and right brain, simple as could be, is that. One was more emotional or visual or something, the other's more analytical, practical, logical, and then there were other kind of floating aspects of your personality that were maybe more, they were logical, but maybe weren't quite as much as, they were kind of in between or something, So I thought I don't know if this is the right order of how it developed, but if I could give names to those different aspects of my way, myself, Blevins was the more analytical and logical, and Clarence was the more feeling and poetical, maybe, way, and subject to falling in love, or that aspect, flying off the handle, and also have them developed in such a way that they represented how you could go about solving a problem. if you wanted to, they were interested in growing up. That's what I was interested in. I wanted to be grown up, you know. And so I could go about it in an analytical way, you know, and create a track record that way, or go about it, you know, in an emotional feeling way, you know. But to be grown up, I equated it to be having a track record of being grown up. And so with that track record, you could have something to stand on to say, you know, I've done this, or I've practiced welding for long enough that now I can weld. You know, I'm a welder now. I'm not just a student, you know. But I wasn't grown up then, you know. And it's similar to like wanting to talk about California when you never lived in California. You know, you end up mumbling a lot. So they end up, you know, you have to deal with it. You're going to end up mumbling a lot till you've done it enough or have that track record. But anyway, I thought the idea of giving them names would just help the understanding, where they could sit and talk to each other and maybe encourage the other to start, which is how the book ends. Blevins is prompting Clarence to begin, you know, and he's tried to do this so many times, but this night he just happens to begin, and then he continues, and it turns into not beginning or not prompting Clarence to begin, and prompting him to continue. You know, it kind of grows, and but either side can only go so far, you know, and so that's where at the end of the first part, Clarence, who's been on the stage, he kind of reaches a stopping point. And Blevins, who has been kind of not quite on center stage, is left to carry on. And of course, the whole character of these parts, of these two parts, and you later learn there are other parts, but the whole character is Ned. So it's the biography of Ned. So after the first part, where one part, Clarence has gone as far as he can go, kind of symbolic of, you know, I've gone this way as much as I can. You know, feelings alone can't solve my problem that I've got. Then this other part, Blevins is left with Ned, and they sit on the back yard at a slope, and Blevins has found a book of poems on the door to Clarence's room and brought him out there to the backyard, and he finds Ned, you know. And Ned asks, well, what are these? And Blevins says, well, I found these on the door. You know, these are, and they find out they're Clarence's book of poems. So they begin reading them, and it grows into becoming what Blevins has to do. You know, he realizes them at some point of being just sentimental type, a lot of them sentimental type stuff, and they can only say so much, but they've started them. And he reasons to himself that, you know, logically he started it, he's continuing, he's got to read them all the way through. You know, and that's his purpose. So at the end of that, he's gone as far as he can go. That's part 2. And so part 3, after that, Ned's left by himself, but Clarence hadn't quite fully died. So Clarence has to kind of nurture or sit with Clarence until he fully dies. And then Ned is left by himself to carry on, realizing that these other parts can't carry him beyond a certain point. But he's not there yet. You know, he's left with continuing. And I think 3 and 4 kind of fill in some of the parts that are missing when Ned has to sit with Clarence, where he tells some more about the situation, and then it recounts some of the stories of Ned getting interested in art and going to school and making a studio, and stuff. A studio, he may have called it then at one time. Because he was going to school and it was called then a studio. But the book ends with Ned not being able to continue. He just doesn't know how to continue. And it ends kind of with a functional mental breakdown. And it ends, he remembers in growing up having walked over his dad's farm to a last field and seeing some sycamore trees at the edge of the field. And then, in the fall, the sycamore trees turn white with white bark. Of course, his dad could see how the crop was doing from this side of the field. There's no point in walking across the field. But trees always struck me. You just don't see white trees. And are you about to run out?
No, I didn't realize this was not tidal away, and I bumped it and then moved.
And so that becomes synonymous as a place in Ned's mind is where the answer might lie. Because this has always been sort of a place of mystery or holiness, that in him. And so if he could just get there, so he decides to leave and go to there, but he doesn't even get out of town before he slips on the ice, and Clarence, or another part of his head, is kind of resurrected to carry him the rest of the way, to drive the truck the rest of the way. He's like in a functional mental breakdown. And when he gets there, well, there's where Blevins is, the other part, But they have to stay there. But in Ned's functional breakdown, where he's very quiet. He's not asking anymore. He's just quiet. But he can hear that in other parts of his head or the mind field, there's stuff going on. But he's not a part of it. Some part of it is battling to be in control of the scene or the field. It turns into be like a character named Victor Thought. But anyway, in the quietness of Ned's mental breakdown, there births another part in his head that was there all along, but maybe just didn't have the opportunity to come to the fore until this quietness developed. And that's Ambry Joe. And he's one who just quietly sits back in the character's head and quietly takes note of it all. And kind of, he's given credit, his notes are given credit for the story being told later on that Billy Perrine had at his disposal to tell about what happened at Muddy Bottom. But anyway, they get to Muddy Bottom and there's Blevins, and Clarence walks across the field to Blevins, and they have to stay there. Ned has no memory of having walked completely across the field to himself, but through Ambry's notes, you generally get the idea that he did walk across there and came back. And the last chapter is that, throughout all those years where Ned is talking about dying and death, it wasn't he who died, it was his mother, Nadel, who in fact died of cancer at 6 o'clock, So that's the way the story was told. I just used, I tried to develop those different aspects, which I think are in common to everybody, and I had, into more of a character-like thing that could help tell the story in probably in a more accurate way than were I to try to use I as a subject so much. because sometimes those different aspects they do take center stage, and even in you become them almost like for maybe good periods of time, and then you realize, well, dang, I've been concentrating on this so much I forgot to smell the roses, and or forgot to do nothing, it's just I think it's a very accurate story of who I was at that age, and told through the anecdotes and where I lived at the time. And I wrote the first draft of it then, but it just took me, I set it aside and went on to the next story or next novel I wrote, which wasn't any good. But and then somewhere along the line I decided, well, I'm going to concentrate on getting the first book done, and so I started really seriously doing that in I guess in the 90s when the volume 3 starts, when I was already into the Mindfield and was needing time to do something in the winter, and it took me maybe 6 years of taking the winter off seriously only for it to get it done. And then I set it aside, and only a couple of years ago revisited it, kind of update, corrected the grammatical mistake. And I found myself in the original draft, well, in the first published book, that I would say shit or hell or something, where if I substituted that for a better explanation of what those things were, it really hit the target more. But at the time, I didn't know how to say, what the hell is going on here. Is it more like saying what the I don't remember what I used, but what what on the porch is going on here, But I think I think I was aware, even at that age, of being in a larger picture of things. And I used the idea of the planets and the stars, and Pluto being out there. And during a pause on the porch, I equated it with one of the characters maybe going to Pluto, or going to Jupiter or something, and coming back. But Pluto was like a far, cold planet, synonymous with those aspects of life where you just kind of out of touch, and when maybe one character says something that the other just doesn't have a clue what's going on, or it shocks him so much, it's like he's sent out there to space and he has to kind of travel back, but things are in order and in a balance. I don't know. It's probably, I don't know how a reader, if they got that from all that, because on the porch, that first part is like just one night. It's like 200 pages, 150 pages long or something. And I don't know if they can stay interested that long through such a short time spell. And in one of the stories, Clarence is talking about high school and brings up Sarah's name, and Ned. Clarence brings it up in Ned's story about Ned, and Blevins is like, what the hell is Sarah doing in this? I don't get this. It just like it's she, that doesn't belong. But Sarah is such a charged, represents such a charged subject matter that of sex and that aspect of life, that for a moment it's equated with a a scene of sexual masturbation or ejaculation or something. It's like a urge. Something happened, and it's like, oh, I got to pee all of a sudden. Well, that name brought up in the story does that to Blevins, and for both of them in a sense, in that they have to. It's like you mentally, for just a moment, well, you have to go through the motions and go to the conclusion just to get it dealt with, And I don't know how well I got that across, or I can actually see them urinating off the porch because I did that at night. But I don't. In the story, neither one of them actually masturbate or ejaculate, but it's the sense and the presence of that avenue and subject matter and way of dealing with it is so established in their heads that they have to kind of go through the motions in their head of that just to continue and go on with the story, or come back and say, oh, this is what we were talking about before you mentioned this. But it was a part of my life, and it was a language, so it was just like those religious terms, it was there. And so that's the way I described it, or it was apparent, it was part of the language, I guess.
You talked about you briefly mentioned your second novel, and you sort of abandoned it for not being good. Was that volume 2?
No, that was the first novel I wrote was volume 1, the first draft of it, and then I wrote the first draft of another novel. It wasn't a continuation of that. It was Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and it was just like a description of events for 3 days, that I never was satisfied with. But then once in the 80s, when I started being serious as to trying to finish volume 1, that's when I included the poetry in it. See, it originally didn't have the poetry in it. And so I probably got through a second or third draft of it and set it aside, and did think of it continuing to another volume, and really for 3 more. And I probably wrote the first draft of those 3 following, but and after I published volume 1, I started working seriously on that volume 2, which would be a continuation. But I had a shop fire that destroyed some of it, and some of 3 and 4, and I never gotten it along further enough to really. I'd gotten it along a little bit, but not really to sense that I had my hands around it, and I don't know if I'll ever go back.
So, describe for me, what is essentially, might end up being this lost, volume of your work. What it have, been.
Well, so you've read volume 1. So it continues with Billy Perrine, who's the one who was actually writing the biography of Ned. So so it continues years later, where Ned has already grown up, and he has grown into a person who can write reasonably well, and that's Billy Perrine. So Billy Perrine is writing in hindsight what would have been what would have happened after Volume 1. So, and that is Ned is trying to grow up, and so he goes back, and it starts out with Billy Perrine was the name. Billy Perrine was the name behind many voices, and so it describes when after enough time for certain things to germinate, finally one voice in Ned did, germinate to take the center stage. He was no longer like he used to be. He really couldn't be called Ned anymore. He's such a different person, So they would take on, as they went through growth, they would take on a different name, as who the main character was. Billy Perrine was one for a period of time, But so it was understood that it was Billy Perrine. He was living uptown where I used to live, and he was writing this biography in it. But he was the one that was really on stage in his world, and he would. It starts out he writing in a very traditional way that biographies are written of Ned, which is a little different than the one of Volume 1 was. It was more like a novelistic way. So it starts out that way, and but then the stories of Billy, that Ned grew into somebody who lost his virginity in his middle 20s or something, and which is probably older than most people. But he was like, that was such a big change, that for them, for him then, he became a character called Billy High, But that can't, that's like another growth of Clarence. It's like that's who Clarence would have grown into, because you lose your virginity and you're into this whole new field that's open to you, and it takes like center stage, but it can only lead you so far. But somewhere in going along with all of this, in all of the characters' minds that were still unsettled, or like this minefield that's over here, that was in Volume 1, where they set, that's where these unconnected, in a way, thoughts or unfully realized parts of selves are contesting each other and trying to battle it out, And sometimes one of them, I can remember, may have left the field and walked uptown and into the door where the main character was staying, And I had I may have written it. The last scene was, I was still living uptown at the time, and so they were all going to come out, one after the other, the front door onto the sidewalk uptown where they lived, of all these different attired, goofy-looking combatants, that represented mental aspects of his makeup. They'd just be almost like Halloween costume, but it may be different historical battlefield type people, one after the other, and a whole line of them. They'd go down to the old train depot loading dock, and they would all pile their armor. They'd take off their armor, and they'd pile it up, all in a big pile in the middle of the tracks, And by then the reader would know this is all kind of metaphorical. They'd know what's going on. All this baggage that you bring with you. You know, you're ready to set it aside. You know, I'm grown up. I know what I want to do. I'm going to work at this job. You know, and all these mental tools that have been of use in the past. You know, they've run their course. So they all come out of that upstairs room, clothed in them, and walk down there and take it off and pile it up. There's a big pile of clothes and armor, you know, on the railroad track. And there, I could just see them sitting there in the evening, waiting for the train to come by, you know, because it's going to hit this and just, you know, that's what they need, you know. And that was going to be the end of the 4 series, you know.
I mean, I know you're not interested in going back to it, but, you know, in my opinion, Volume 1 was something really special. But, the biggest problem I have with it is that you can tell it was one half of a larger narrative. So, I mean, if you ever feel up to it, I would really encourage you to go back and write the second volume.
I think the third and fourth ones, I probably just got the first draft of it, and I don't really know if I was on the right track. The second one now I may, and I think I have enough of it I probably could. But one of the things that was written into it, in order for the characters, for Billy Perrine, you know, he was like this biographer. He could write well enough at the time. that was his job, you know. He kind of like had to do what he had to do in order to grow up, you know. And one of the jobs he was going to do was to include the first diaries of Ned, which I've since have published. So there's no point in going through them again, much like the poems, you know, where you sit down and you kind of make the whole day out of it. So, but there may be some that I might, but if I ever do, it's probably the last thing I'll do after I get these others.
So the fictional autobiography was originally supposed to be 4 volumes?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And so that sort of more or less morphed into your notes.
Well, I got through. I'd got them done before Volume 3 started. Before I started the journal. So what I had gotten done was probably 3 drafts of Volume 2. And only 1 draft of 3 and 4. Now the first draft is, you know, that's the first draft. So I'd gotten them to a point where I needed a break from them, and I'd set them aside. And in setting them aside, I started on my journal, which was Volume 3, and then I started on seriously trying to publish Volume 1, you know, which took me to 96. And for 97 and 98 in the winter time, I was working on Volume 2, and then I had to fire and burn my journals. I can show you in there. I was surprised that they were stacked one to the other, so I guess air didn't get to them. And so when they sprayed it, I don't know if it was on fire or not, but the edges were charred, you know. So that most of it was, the edges were charred. I lost very little of that. But I have the first draft of 3 and 4, but the top 10 pages are gone, you know, so that's kind of depressing. But I did have enough of Volume 2 survived where I might could do it. I don't know. I don't know.
I just thought I would pick your brain about it a little bit because, you know, you've mentioned it a little bit about it talking to me and in your books, but, you know, I wasn't really, you know, sure what this story entailed.
After I published Volume 1 in 96, well, I was working on it for 2 years, but then I had to fire. And so I stopped for 5 years. I stopped keep writing, you know. And when I started back writing was in 91 with my journal. And kept it for 10 years and published volume 1, and then stopped for another 5 years. And when I started back, that was with volume 4 when Dad died. So I really, I got other things done, and getting volume 1 took a while.
I know in volume 4, you talked about, I think it was...
And matter of fact, the next installment of 4 is what I was working on this winter.
In volume 4, I think, that is, you mentioned how you wanted to note for your entire life. Do you still note?
Keep a journal?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I have. I've kept one since then, but I very well may stop soon. I don't know. Yeah, I kept that first journal, and then stopped that and got into sculpting, painting, and metalworking, and then got into writing my novels. First drafts of it, and then I started the journal back only in 1990, which is a year after I started the Mindfield, and I kept it for 9 years till the fire, and I was about ready to stop anyway. I was, and so I stopped for 4 or 5 years, and when I restarted it was when and in that time I got Dina and Dad died, and I started putting up Dina in volume 4, and since then I've kept it. So that's since 05, 15, well, since then.
You,
But I'm about ready to stop. I mean, the Mindfield Notes, volume 3, I kind of burned out. I was kind of glad the fire stopped it. I thought really it burned them all up, And it was only later when I went back and thought it was worth publishing, or interested me enough to tell a story. But so after 15 years of doing it, I'm kind of ready to stop for a while. And it may give me more time to finish, the ones I have done. Maybe a good chance to do something. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, that sounds like a great plan. I was just going to bounce off that and say, speaking of, stopping a certain kind of work to do another kind of work, I know that in your books you had written about once you feel like you're done with the metal Mindfield, that you might go into, full-time writing your books.
Mm-hmm.
And you even mentioned filmmaking. I guess my question was, are you still interested in the area of film? Because I know that you tried to do that visual documentary of your work at one point, and I still even have a camera back there. Is that still something you want to experiment with?
Probably not. I had one time, I guess a couple years after I started the Mindfield, I thought I'd get a camera and take fairly regular footage of it. And that, like as you said, that I mentioned in my journals, well, this is what I'll do in older age, when I can no longer physically able to work with it. It'll be there for me to work on. But when that burned, I'm not that I don't have that. I'm not if I do stop working on the Mindfield, I have enough of the journals to keep me busy. But I don't think I could probably healthfully write year-round. I'd probably still need a break from it to do something else. And I don't know what that would be. I might just be more of what my wife might call a traditional husband. It might be the opportunity to do that. She says, well, she has often said, well, maybe you'll start painting again. But I don't think I will. I don't know. You can't just pick up and, well, I can't just pick up and start painting. It sounds too simple, I have to have one thing, a good place to paint, proper tools, which I don't have anymore, I could get them, and something to say, you know, and once you have that, then you can't say it all at once. It'll take a period of time to get it said, or to get it said well, or to get it said enough where it's more than just one picture, or so that that's like another. It'd be like, I mean, I know how to do it, but it would be like resuming a career. I mean, that can't be. I wouldn't want to enter into it with the idea of, oh, well, I'll just do this 1 year,
Something you're already sort of feel done with.
I think I probably am. Yeah, I don't think I have anything more to say.
You've sort of like,
but
that's an experience that you like completed, and it's,
But I couldn't sit around and do nothing. I feel like I said, I have enough writing that it would keep me pretty busy during the year, but I couldn't do it all year round. But it'd probably be the time to invest in a deeper relationship.
I did want to ask you about one specific piece of the Mindfield, because I read about this in Mr. Scruton's website, and I think you had mentioned it some time ago when we first met, but I found out that the rowboat that is in the Mindfield under the Begin is William Least Heat Moons, and that you met him. And yeah, I read about that story on the website, but I was just wanting to hear it from your perspective, how that story went.
Do you know have you looked him up, or?
I looked him up, after,
the book that it comes from?
Yes.
River Horse.
River Horse, that's right. I know his most famous one is Blue Highways.
Yeah.
I couldn't remember the other one.
Well, Prairie Earth was...
give me 1 second. I got to put another SD card in this thing.
That's all right.
We've recorded so much that...
you caught it, didn't you?
The what?
Well, I mean, we didn't keep talking for 10 minutes. And
No. It must have just happened while we were conversing. That's where you take multiple of everything. I've got another SD card in here. The larger one. But yeah, I did look him up.
It's a canoe. It's not a rowboat.
Oh, I apologize. He's got a really, he's one of those people who he's got a really nice, white hair and beard combo. He's
Well, that's his older age, though.
Yeah.
But his first 3 books were bestsellers, but Blue Highways is the most famous.
Yeah. Sorry, I kind of cut you off there.
So you ready to go?
Yeah.
Well, I came to works of William Least Heat Moon during the time I was putting up my water tank. So it's mentioned in my journal, so you will know about that. But I'd read reviews of his books years before, and I remember what I remember about it is that the reviews were always included something on the order of, his books will be classics, and but I never was interested enough to read them. But I had a friend that gave me a second-hand copy of Blue Highways. This was during my water tank thing, so it's in there. And I had read Blue Highways and gotten interested in him. I think maybe before I actually started the water tank, but very shortly before. And so I looked up and enjoyed it, so I found out what his second book was, which was after traveling around the country, he stayed place in one county and did a deep map, as he called it, deep history of that one county. Very interesting, especially as a companion to having traveled around. And, you know, which I could still relate to because everybody kind of grows up in a place, and it's like, well, he's telling the story of that place, which could be told here and is probably told, and at least is there. And it was very good. And so I may have read parts of that at the beginning of this water tank adventure. And but definitely his third book, which was a story of a water journey from New York Harbor to Seattle through the country, through the waterways of the country with very few portages. Generally from New York Harbor up the Hudson River to the Erie Canal to Lake Erie, from which he made a short portage to the mouth of the Allegheny River, which he used, first time he used the canoe. It was too shallow for his motorboat, which he always had two people, another person with him, rotating in and out among seven. And then once it got deep enough for the regular powerboat, they used the powerboat from the Allegheny to the Ohio, to the Mississippi, there at Cairo, Illinois, and up the Mississippi to St. Louis, where he caught the Missouri, and from there on is pretty much retracing Lewis and Clark. And he used the powerboat out west where it got too shallow. And so anyway, I was reading this book while I was putting up my water tank, you know, and liked his first two books, and liked everything I was reading. So, especially liked River Horse because with traveling around the country in a van, that's more. I knew something about that. I mean, that's available to a lot of people, you know, and living in one place in one county is kind of available. But this water journey was kind of exotic to me, and I really found that interesting. I mean, this is new stuff to me, the language, you know. And of course, all along the way, he tells the deep history of the countryside and of the country. And also, I liked this book, ended up liking it the most of the ones I've read, because from the start, he had I call it a recipe for success. I mean, he was going to start at a certain point, he had a definite route to follow, and he was going to end at a certain point and in a certain amount of time. He couldn't deviate it from it like you can in a car driving around the country. You know, you can stop and go off this way and that. You know, so because of that, it lent a prison-like aspect that was possible along this journey. You know, he was locked in. You know, it had to go this specific way. He didn't know how it was going to. A lot of it I was going to get through it, but he was locked in. It was going to be successful along this way, or it was not going to be successful. So I found the way of I found that very comparable to much in my daily life that could relate to it. You know, of how if you have a job to do, and you know what the job is, and it's got to be done pretty much this way, you know. That how are you going to deal with it when something goes wrong? You know, you have a flat tire, or he has, you know, things equivalent to that. So the way he dealt with that, I thought, was very instructive, and that is an example of how I like to read books and learn things. I like the language to sing as well, but which his does. But you know, learning how to deal with stuff in ways that I could relate to. But anyway, so I was putting up the water tank and was reading this book, hadn't gotten through with it. But I'd gotten through to where he is in the middle of Missouri, in Columbia, Missouri, where he takes a layover of 2 days. And he mentions that this is his home. He lives nearby, his home base. So in that 2 days, he goes to a couple of restaurants. He mentions one as being his favorite pub and restaurant. Mentions it by name. So not long after that, I get I'm working down there in the Mindfield, and my older brother Charlie shows up, who's a pilot and has a plane. He says, "Would you like to fly with me to Lincoln, Nebraska? I bought a car for my daughter." And how he bought it up there, you know, I don't know. But and would you want to drive it home? Well, sure. That's a vacation for me. I like to fly. I like to drive at my own speeds by myself. And besides, it'll bring me back through Columbia, Missouri, where Heat Moon lives. And I'll just make up a little letter or something and tell him about me and my books and my work, and look up this restaurant, this tavern, and ask if this guy Heat Moon ever comes through there again. And if he which I did, and if he does, I'll say, "Will you give him this letter from me?" And so that's the way it happened. I gave him the owner or manager who I met there this letter, and evidently he gave it to Heat Moon, and Heat Moon wrote me back, and so that's how we met. And I think when his next, that's how we met, through letters. And I may have written him a couple of times after that or something, but his next book came out, and I think it was after I'd finished my water tank, but I used a few passages from River Horse, which I was reading at the time of putting up the water tank, which exampled a way of dealing with a certain set of circumstances that were applicable to what I was doing. I was putting up a water tank. You know, I had a recipe for success. You know, and it helped me. So I'd say, well, he's along here, you know, doing this, and he ran into trouble. You know, but anyway, when his next book came out, after I finished my tank and my journal, I got online and found out, well, he was giving a signing at Kansas City, Missouri. I said, well, this is my chance. I found out about it like 3 days before it was happening. And so I went up there and showed up and introduced myself. And of course, he knew my name and stuff, and shook his hand. That was an important, meaningful thing to me, because I equated it with shaking Tolstoy's hand. I knew of Tolstoy before then. My granddad lived in the same time frame as Tolstoy, and I used to think, why didn't my dad go over and shake Tolstoy's hand? Of course, that wasn't his dream. That was my dream. So this was the way I could fulfill my dream. Heat Moon came into my life much like when Tolstoy did, or his works did, where they played a meaningful part. So that's how I compared them. That was like shaking Tolstoy's living hand, which I told Heat Moon about. But anyway, and then that's how I actually met him in person. And then maybe a few years after that, there was a documentary about his second book that was being premiered in the county in Kansas where it took place. So I went to that and re-met him, I think, the second time. And with him at the time was one of the 7 people who took part in that River Horse book. And I ended up asking Heat Moon about something that I'd thought about since then. I said, well, what happened to that canoe that was in the book? Because it was metal, and the book meant a lot to me. And I thought, well, in my head, it had become my language, something I'd written about, helped me along in putting up my tank. So, it was something I was interested in, and we like to put it. And, he was all for. Actually, it had not been put in the water since it had been pulled out of the water, and it was not being abused. So he was glad for me to get it, and put it up in my Mindfield. And once I did that, I kind of used it as a way of strengthening a theme that was already in place and beginning to grow, of my Mindfield being like a ship, especially from the front, looks somewhat like a ship. And then tying in with it being a grave marker, or maybe the ship leaving for the next life once I die, And the canoe is like under the begin word, like a sunset circle thing. So that's how that came about. And I sent him pictures of it, and I think he posted it on his Facebook page on the pictures if you scroll back. But so when it came time to spill a face that I wanted to feel in my Mindfield a certain way with my favorite authors, he was one of them. It was Shakespeare, Tolstoy, Thompson, and Heat Moon, and that was Hunter S. Thompson, who all 3 of them, and I don't know how their writings may in a literary way match up, but all 3 of them came into my life at a time where they had deep meaning for me. So that's how they're compared that way, and so.
That's awesome, man.
I was glad.
That's the dream, is to meet someone you super admire a lot, and get to shake their hand, and then to be able to get
incorporated
canoe from him to put in the Mindfield. Incredible, just incredible.
Yeah, I mean it just adds something to realize meeting I admire his works just like I did do Tolstoy and Thompson and Heat Moon, but then to actually see that he's a flesh and blood person with, he's a real person, he has to sit down in the same bathroom just like the rest of us, go to the restroom and fart and piss and eat, enjoys food, or has bad moments, but can create, has a side of him that can come out like this, which many people do, but it may come out in ways that are not recordable as books are, say, or metal structures are. They might come out as having successfully raised their family, their children. That's quite an accomplishment. But the record of that is kind of hard to read. It's not as accessible, But anyway, it was glad to meet the person behind these works. It meant a lot to me. It still does.
Well, I think that's a pretty good thing to end on, a little high point, because it is 5:30.
That's fine.
Keep you. We don't have to record this question. I was wondering, because in your books you mentioned, little tree stumps that you painted and whatnot.
That's in my.
Are
It's in the back of one of my books. I think. Oh.
Well, I was just wondering if you still had those, if they were still around.
No, they disintegrated.
Gotcha. Well, you can unlock your phone if you just unlock it and stop the recording.